Hey everyone, thanks for being here. This is the Reverie Roundtable, which we have Mondays 8 p.m. Eastern. We've got a fantastic group of individuals. They might have convinced you otherwise with what we just said, but they are a fantastic group of individuals. So let's introduce them. If you're watching this on YouTube later on, please like, comment, and subscribe. Helps out the channel. I would love to have you here. Okay, let's introduce. Let's introduce my man Wick back with us, right? Just a bit, it's a bit chillier there for him. A cold wind blows and he shivers. Wick, how are you doing?
I'm much more aerodynamic than I was, and this is going to be necessary, right, to dodge all the points that people throw at me today. I'm going to do a lot of that. I'm going to do a lot of speed running through some trains of thought. It'll be fun, but now I'm equipped for it, right? Honest answer, I had to go out in public recently, and I was very scruffy. And I wanted to feel good and look good. And I am going to be going to TwitchCon, and so this is in preparation for that as
Oh, nice.
well. So yeah,
Nice.
nice to be here. The topics are great today, and I'm really excited to get into both. So
Okay, doke. Next, we have my man Eucharist. We haven't had here in forever. We've missed Eucharist so much. Eucharist, thank you for stopping by. Honestly, like it's been lonely here without you.
Oh,
but-
I appreciate it. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad I could make it tonight. We were, as I said, road tripping back today, but I got your message right before we got on the road, and I was like, you know what? I think I can do this tonight. So skated in right under the wire. Although I apparently had an extra half hour, I could have been, doing research and getting a leg
Or
up.
wait in, giving your own opinion.
Yeah, I just don't. It's not what I signed up for tonight. I'm in discrimination brain, not relationship conversation brain. I'm ready to duke it out.
I thought it was basically beauty discrimination that we were discussing. But yeah, Eucharist is like, I've got a hot wife. I don't want you guys to comment about
yeah, no, I just not much to weigh in at this point.
All right. Well, thank you. Seriously, I'm so happy to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
The other nicest person I know is Corey. He's here. Corey, thanks for stopping by once again, being a part of this great member of our community. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Always grateful to be here. Always happy to receive the invitation and oblige when I can. Try to never take it for granted. And I'm a very serious, PhD candidate in biochemistry. You can find me on Twitch, Corey Campbell 84, and I'm here to call out my good friend Eucharist as a coward, dodging our conversation, just running nonstop.
Yeah, I'm a very real PhD candidate in fake science, and I say, whine some more, you real scientist. Okay.
All Eucharist knows is alchemy. All right, let's go to our friend Scott. Scott, thanks for coming back and already bringing the spice at the very start of all this. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. Yeah, so I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty. Find me everywhere as Fabian Liberty. Really need YouTube subs right now because I'm at almost at 6,000 watch hours and 30,000 views, but need to get monetized, I need subs. So if you want to show some love or you want to hate watch, I don't care. It's all good for the algorithm. Hook me up. Also, I just wanted to say, in the name of giving advice to friends, Wick, I consider you a friend of me in a lot of ways. And I want to let you know that, I do respect your hair choices. But just so you know, if you want to join Patriot Front, you actually have to be an FBI agent. That's how that works. So, just letting you know. Right. Okay. I just want to let you know in case you thought the haircut alone would get you in. It's not going to be good enough.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have our Dark Lord and Savior Doobie. Doobie's back with us. Thank you for stopping by again. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to say to Scott. Scott, if you have a link, a YouTube link, if you could put it in my chat or something, then see we can go up.
I see you trying to force me to get into your chat. I don't want to watch all these people hate on me. All right, I'll put it in.
All right. Well, you provided me ample reason. Okay, moving on. Topic 1. Brigham Young University is a school owned by the Mormon Church. They have a rule which prohibits same-sex dating and even showing any signs of affection to members of the same sex. A federal lawsuit has been launched against the school and others in other schools for their anti-LGBTQ policies. Should a school that has such policies receive public funds? Should any school, whether they receive funds or not, be allowed to discriminate on the basis of race or sexual orientation? Or should the rights of private organizations always be paramount? This came to my it didn't recently come to my attention, but like I saw an article talking about how about a person who went to Brigham Young University and who was gay and who felt lonely. They are trying to like provide support for incoming students, and that support was shot down. And it was just like, it's really sad, actually. It's really annoying. But it seems weird that this still exists to me. I thought actually it didn't at this point, but it does. So like, but they are a private organization, so should that matter? We'll start with our friend Wick.
Yeah, so I didn't graduate from Brigham Young University, but as someone who's raised Mormon, a lot of my family did, and I know a lot of people who attended BYU or one of their offshoots like BYU Idaho or things like that. So they are a private institution, right? So they don't receive public funds in the same way as a public or a state college would, or things like that. They obviously still get funding from people's GI bills and things like that, but this is a little different than directly receiving money from the state. When it comes down to the meat of the question, though, whether or not we should allow private institutions to make decisions based on prejudices and behaviors, I think it's important to note the difference right here between refusing entry to someone who is LGBTQ rather than having rules against PDAs and public displays of affection. I don't know how it is now currently, but there was a time where all PDAs in BYU were strictly prohibited. All long hair was strictly prohibited. You couldn't show anything, like you had to have like not long sleeves but longer sleeves. You couldn't wear jeans, right? They've had all sorts of rules. So I think there is a substantive difference between simply having rules against PDAs and rules against accepting people of different groups. If their rule was we don't accept people who have these beliefs or have these lifestyles or are of these races or genders or what have you, that would be wrong. And I think that that's something that the government should act against. But when it comes to these kind of lesser discriminations, and they are still discriminations, don't get me wrong, I don't know if I would be okay with the federal government coming down against them. That's my stance.
Thank you so much. Next, Eucharist, please.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question for me, and I've been like, something I've thought about before, something I've been like going back and forth on all day. I'm uncomfortable with a lot of this from a variety of different angles. So first, like conversations around churches' tax exempt status, I think that people sometimes forget that there are other exemptions to Title IX regulations. So for instance, we still have single-sex colleges in the United States who maintain the right to only admit men or only admit women. That is one of the exemptions to Title IX. Their admissions process is exempt from sex discrimination under Title IX. That was built into the code as well, along with this religious exemption and some other ones. So I just as a general rule, I wish people would think more broadly about these things and say, like, if we say exemptions are bad, we need to get rid of them. No discrimination should be allowed. There's a lot of other things that might fall as well that we should be aware of. I think that yeah, as Wick said, like BYU and organizations like it, religious colleges are different. They are private institutions, but they do receive federal money, specifically most often through federally backed student loans and through Pell Grants. And so the question for a lot of people is like, should the money that's basically funding the student, not the school, as directly, should that bring this obligation? Of course it does. If you take federal money, there are strings attached. The lawsuit itself I found really interesting. So the head of this organization that started the lawsuit, the Religious Exemption Accountability Project, has said recently, like last month, that he expects a ruling within the next couple of months on this. But the article that you sent, which was from last year, Prime, said that the outlook doesn't look good. And the person who wrote that article is a law professor who wrote one of the first pieces of real scholarship on these religious exemptions in 2016. It's linked in the article if you guys want to go read it. But I ended up like really agreeing with that law review piece that concludes, and I just want to read from it really quickly. Sorry, I lost it. In the end, administrative implementation of religious exemption to Title IX is not how a pluralistic society should structure religious exemption to generally applicable non-discrimination laws. What that means is what we've done is we've given over a huge amount of control to the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education. They basically just get to decide whether or not they give this exemption to a school or not. The school writes a letter. You can go read the letters for yourself. And they basically always grant the exception, but it's just up to this office. It's just an administrative bureaucratic task. And that's not how we've handled a religious exemption in other cases. We have legislative exemptions. We've had like RFRA and all these other things. And we've had Supreme Court exemptions, things like the Yoder case, and more recently the case about the Catholic adoption place in Philadelphia. But this is one of the only ones that we have that this is just like pure bureaucratic administrative fiat that administers this exception and decides whether or not it applies. I kind of agree with this article at the end of the day that I don't think that's how we should be handling it. We should probably be handling it through the legislative practice. Like that's how we should handle these things in a pluralistic society. I think, but at the end of the day, the second question, should these institutions be allowed to discriminate at all? Yes, I think private organizations and institutions should be allowed to discriminate. I think that's at the heart of freedom of association, right? I wouldn't expect to be able to go join a mosque and then, say, oh, by the way, I'm going to bring my alcohol and my pork and I'm just going to hang out. You guys are cool with that, right? No, they can discriminate against me. They could bodily remove me if they wanted to. So I think that if we're going to freely associate, you have to be able to discriminate within these private organizations. But yeah, there's going to be strings attached when you start taking state money. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I think there's lots of things to talk about, so I'm very excited. Let's go to
I
Corey.
agree. Yeah, well, I'm a filthy Canadian, so I'm a little bit of an outsider, and I'm disappointed to not see my fellow Canadian lactoid on the panel, but maybe next time.
I think
But
he's visiting Toronto, visiting
oh yeah,
home
that
base.
makes sense. Checking in with CSIS, our Canadian CIA. That
Yeah.
totally makes sense. Based off of my sort of the understanding that I gathered from Wick in terms of like and Eucharist, like Brigham Young University is like a private institution or private school, and therefore it doesn't like directly receive federal funding, but it sort of indirectly receives federal funding, and it seems like sort of a gray area to a certain extent. And like if in fact what Eucharist says is true, and I have no reason to doubt anything that they say because I trust them, I tend to sort of err with their position, but I do think there's something to be said of like if there's in my mind, and I'll be transparent of like I'm pretty anti-religious, and so if there's any form of like indirect or direct federal money like going to this institution, like I'm totally in favor of like there should be no discriminatory practices, and sort of what Eucharist touched upon of like the potential ramifications in terms of like, well, yes, there's discrimination, and like there's discrimination when it comes to like single-sex schools. I'm totally okay with abolishing single-sex schools. I'm okay with that consequence because I actually don't think those should exist either. There's a lot else that I want to get into, but I'll keep it short for now.
Very interesting. I'm really liking this conversation so far. Let's go to Scott.
Yeah, so Eucharist kind of took a lot of what I was going to say, but I just want to say this, that if you discriminate in any way against BYU, and for the record, this suit names a lot of other universities. My alma mater, Liberty University, for example, I went to grad school there, and it was kind of the same thing. There was a dress code. You weren't allowed to have any public displays of affection, regardless whether or not they were hetero or homosexual. So when I did my research, I was like, I wonder, is that what's going on, right? And like, so I go to BYU's website, and they're like, this doesn't lead to marriage, no homos. And I was like, oh shit, all right, fucking BYU doesn't give a fuck. All right, let's go. But you know what I mean? I was like, I thought maybe it was just like some bullshit, but like, no, they're legit just hard discriminate against homosexual people, and then they're like, no, you go to our belonging place where we try and convince you to not be gay or we kick you out. But at the end of the day, like, you know, the university has to have a right to do that. That is just what freedom of association is. The question is, are they defrauding people? Right? Are they not making this clear? And I think BYU actually probably has a better case than some of these other universities, because some of the other universities will discriminate against LGBT people, right? But they won't be very open about it. And so there's a possibility that someone goes to that school thinking they'll be accepted, and then their behavior isn't accepted, or their life isn't accepted, or who they are, their identity, right, isn't accepted. And then you could maybe make a case that like they deserve some compensation for the fraud that occurred. But I mean, with BYU, it's very clear that like they do not appreciate or allow any form of homosexuality. You know what I mean? So like there's no fraud occurring, right? You chose to go to a school that is against your, either you could say choices, lifestyle, or you could simply say who you are. And if you go there willingly and they're not denying you transcripts, because in the case, you know, if you read some of the examples, one of the things is, you know, they temporarily suspended someone. They were like, look, you were put on administrative suspension because like you came out and like you put a bunch of like pro LGBT stuff on your Twitter, which is kind of authoritarian and creepy as fuck. I don't necessarily appreciate it, but I respect their right to do so. And on top of that, they gave them all of their transcripts, right? They're not denying them anything that they've done, etc. So there might be some cases, you know, some limit cases for things that teachers might have done or like the culture might have done. But I think for the most part, yeah, you can't discriminate against them. Title IX, you know, 34 CFR, statute 106.12, like clearly gives them a religious exemption. You know, and the thing is that if you try and take away that religious exemption, right, and you say, well, they shouldn't have that because, you know, it's against that discrimination. Or let's say you take all federal funding away from them in terms of like the GI Bill and federal student loans and make them like not able to apply for those things so that it's a totally private university. Both of these are still a form of discrimination because the market gives these things to other people and puts them in an uncompetitive advantage by subsidizing universities that behave the way that they want to behave. Right. And so obviously, you know, the ANCAP here, the right answer is to get the fucking federal government out of education anyways, because they've ruined it and made it overly expensive. But yeah, I just, you know, while I personally dislike a lot of what BYU does and it doesn't match my values, I respect their right to do that.
QB, please.
I think that LGBT people are at some point just going to need to accept that some people, whether it's due to religious indoctrination or a general sense of revulsion toward the unnatural, will never accept their lifestyle. Right? There's going to be some people out there who are just not going to accept that you're, you know, lesbian or gay or trans or a deer person or whatever the fuck you're doing. Some people just don't. They're not going to like it. So given that a group of those people has formed a private institution where they've made it very clear they're not interested in allowing the perpetuation of this kind of lifestyle within their private institution, these people should just go to another school. That being said, I do agree that there is like the government does have like an interest in shaping the culture, right? And I think it would be a positive thing if the culture was shaped in a way that this kind of discrimination was less common. So I think I'd agree that, you know, if they're receiving public funds, given that these public funds are coming from lots of LGBT people, lots of people who don't agree with this kind of discrimination, it does make sense to say that, hey, if we're funding this thing, right, they don't get, they're going to be rules that come attached to this, and we want one of those rules to be that you can't discriminate against this group of people. And that does open up a lot of other interesting doors. But I think as a baseline, I think that makes sense. I think that's a totally fair and reasonable position to have.
So to address that a little bit, so at least to my knowledge, right? And I could be wrong. I did a little bit of research on this, and other than when they enter into partnerships with public universities, such as the University of Utah, the only federal funding that they receive is through things like the GI Bill, federal subsidized loans. And in that case, I think that I would draw the distinction of the money isn't going directly to the school, and the people who are using the money they receive from these loans and choosing to go to BYU or another such school with their federal money that they have received, I think that kind of gives a lot more leeway, I think, to what should be allowed. I do not think you should be able to tell an individual that you are giving a federal loan to that you can't go to these universities if you use our federal money. I think that smacks a little bit of authoritarianism, in my opinion.
Wait, why?
Right? Why? Because
Yeah.
if you are giving money to go to college, but if the colleges that you are allowed to choose have to be of the same zeitgeist or the same kind of ideology that the government approves, this goes into some very bad territory. So say, for example,
What
if
bad
Trump gets
territory?
elected, let me give you an example. Trump gets elected, right? And he thinks that any college teaching CRT is just antithetical to American values. So he makes a
Faith?
law saying if you go to any university that creates a CRT, you cannot use your federal loan money to choose to go to that. I think we'd all have problems with that, or most of us would have problems
No.
with that. Well, maybe
Wait,
not
hold
you,
on.
but
Well,
I
I
think
mean,
most of us would.
like,
Wait.
I mean, so you're saying that if there were like on the other hand, if there were like a private college that formed that was run by open white supremacist Nazi types, right? And they were in this college indoctrinating people into fascism. You would say that federal money should be going to that college?
If the people who choose to go to it want to use their federal funds to go to it, I don't think you can tell them no. Well, not at
Why?
least not morally. I think
Why?
legally, obviously, you can, but I think that morally, you're taking away their right to choose in that case, and
Well,
I
they should.
think
Well,
that's
if they're reaching into the
so weird.
public, like the public piggy bank, and the public is saying, "Hey, we're going to invest in your future toward education," I think it's totally fine for the public through our representatives to say that, "Hey, you can't use this money, this investment, to do this fucked up shit." Like, I really don't understand why
But
this
what
is.
the government decides is fucked up shit can change dramatically based
Sure,
on generation to
that's true.
generation, and also based on the current like like whatever party happens to be in charge. Like for example, back in the 60s and the 50s and things like that, many of the if the government were to take this stance, right? Any college that had uh the allowed LGBT public displays of affection, they wouldn't be able to receive federal money for that reason because it would have
Well,
been the government
but yeah, but the way
deciding
that
in
you
this
combat
case
that
that it's
the way that you combat that, you just make it really difficult to pass these things so that they don't happen willy-nilly, right? Like it's like there's a long process you need to go through, and you make it very difficult to do this kind of thing.
I
Right? So,
mean, we
it's
we
not
have
like jumping from year to year, but even still, like I don't understand why you would say that if there's an off chance that Trump or some other meanie might get elected,
it's not an
and
off
use
chance.
this rule and then use this rule to do mean things. So therefore, we need to allow all the terrible shit that might happen in Trump's America. We need to allow it right now. So if there were like a white supremacy university or an anti-CRT university or a university that was indoctrinating people into like anti-transness, whatever pet issue you have, we should allow public funding to go through to that university because you're afraid of what Trump might do.
So the problem is when you make these mechanisms in order to allow the federal government to dictate what is moral and what is immoral, what is right and what is wrong, it's going to be much more easy for them to abuse it than if you simply do not create these mechanisms in the first place. It
Doesn't make
creates
any
an extra
sense.
obstacle, for example. It creates an
Right.
extra
But no,
obstacle.
the issue here is you just go one layer back, right? Wick, I'm actually surprisingly like I'm agreeing with literally everything you're saying. But obviously I don't want fucking Nazi schools funded by taxpayer dollars. But the problem is that we've created a system where the government takes money from people and then uses that money to subsidize the university system instead of letting the market handle this situation. And so the situation that you're describing, Doobie, is that a Nazi school be funded by taxpayers sounds awful, right? And you're using that as like the refutation as to why we shouldn't let a heavily Marxist influence, which would be like basically every sociology degree in America,
Yeah.
right? Like
My
why would no?
sociology
I mean,
degree.
Wait, we are
well,
so we already
just
have like
because
so
the
many.
majority of sociologists are like will say they're critical theorists or Marxists.
So we already have so many layers before we even get to a school being able to get this federal money, right? Like you can only get federally backed student loans, you can only get Pell Grants, you can only use GI Bill at accredited institutions, right? And so you have certain schools that are approved by their state board of education to grant degrees, but are not accredited in a way that the federal government will recognize for the purposes of those loans. Okay, so those schools are already out. I would think that would catch most Nazi schools, okay? But then like we have like several thresholds here. What we're talking about now is a particular policy that's relatively new in American higher education compared to, you know, colleges being founded in the 1700s to now. We passed this in the 70s, right? Pretty new, kind of bureaucratic fiat. We don't even have to go back to like the 60s or the 70s. We can look at just two things that have happened very recently. So the current Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Catherine Lehman, got a lot of flack back during her first tenure from I have the wiki up in front of me. I don't remember this, but 2013 to 2017, because she changed some rules in how Title IX was applied, particularly for sexual harassment and sexual assault cases, and was criticized basically by for undermining due process. And then the Trump administration came in and kind of gutted all of that, and then the Biden administration came back in and reappointed her and is reinstating all of this. There's this kind of like bureaucratic whiplash that we've given over just this like administrative fiat to them that's just crazy. But then on the other side of the equation, we have the Paycheck Protection Plan, or whatever it was called, the PPP, right? Where we had all of these organizations, religious institutions included, Catholic churches and everything else, that were able to access this money because it was generally available to the public if you showed that you needed it to keep your staff on, blah, blah, blah. And then here's the, you know, mechanisms for forgiveness. So that was a case where, yeah, the federal government was doling out money to tons of people that y'all would think were awful, fascist, transphobe, whatevers, but it was just generally available if you met certain criteria, and we gave it to them. They were federally funded. So I think the problem with maybe both of those is that we just have stuff coming from on high. PPP was legislative, so maybe that's not as bad. But like, to your point earlier, Scott, about people being defrauded, sometimes people are, like you mentioned, like BYU, other schools like this, they've got statements of faith, they've got handbooks, codes of conduct. You know, if you don't know this stuff going into it, you're kind of like closing your eyes. But there are cases where like a school will discriminate in this way, and then the student will say, whoa, like, why'd you do that? And then they'll apply for a religious exemption, right? So the religious exemption is kind of assumed. You don't have to get it, but it has been enforced, like somebody getting pregnant out of wedlock, and then they lose their job at a nominally Christian school, and they're like, wait, you can't do that, and then they get it. Yeah. So
and BYU is clearly not fraudulent in this because
no, I think
really
it's just clear
but
everywhere.
Like, but also just to the whole like Nazi thing, right? Like, you know, so this is a book that I'm reversed. I'm not gonna. It's ethnicity and family therapy, right? So even at Liberty University, right, I had to take a multicultural competencies course, right, in terms of like, which was a super fucking woke class, by the way. Because that's the only way you get KCREP accredited to be a counselor, right? So like even when there's also these pseudo government private institutions like KCREP, you know, for the ACA and things like that that require accreditation as well. And like you can't get most loans, and you can't go to a school for a counseling degree, not just as a regionally and federally accredited university, but also like for a counseling program, it needs to be KCREP accredited. So like there's a ton of barriers to entry here from a lot of different places. And I know that BYU, I don't know if they have a counseling program specifically, but if they did, they would essentially need the same thing if they wanted to get like any level of seriousness or funding or capacity to be able to like.
Yes. One more thing, and then I'll shut up for a little bit. Oh no, I just lost it. Sorry, somebody else go.
I want to sort of address or like ask about the point that I think Dewey made, or I think Dewey made, in terms of like, you know, if you just don't agree with the school's policies, you just go to a different school. So I would ask the question to Wick, since they shared that they grew up Mormon, or they're like more in the whatever Mormon community. So this is just like ignorance on my part, because I just don't know, like, how much choice does, like, you know, whatever a student growing up in a Mormon community have in choosing universities?
Plenty.
Like, is it
I didn't go there, for example, and I was very big into it. Like, in fact, there's a kind of like this counterculture in the Mormon religion that if you did go to BYU, you're a normie.
You're a
like,
square.
Yes, basically. And so there is I'm sure in certain families and certain conditions, there is a lot of social pressure, right, to go to BYU, but that can be found with any university. I don't think that's
Well, yeah.
unique,
So I'm
right?
more asking the larger question of like the freedom to go to a non-Mormon university. Like, is
Yeah,
that like
easy. Yeah.
okay?
That's going to wildly depend, right? Because I knew people whose families would not pay for their school if they didn't go to Liberty, for example.
Right,
Right.
that's
Like this is a
pretty
real
much
thing.
I mean, yeah, but that's
what I wanted to address.
that's
So-
not
Yeah,
a that's not a unique
no, I think the
position.
parental
I don't
stuff
think that's
we
a
can deal with separately, maybe. But
yeah,
like,
that's tangential, right? I don't think
Yeah,
that
no, I
it's
understand it's tangential,
it's a
but like,
different
I'm just trying to
it
problem.
figure,
matters.
like
It does matter, but
No,
not
I
maybe
agree
not
with
the
you.
federal
people
policy.
I
have these
guess
perfectly free agents, especially like growing up who are still living
no
with
one's
their parents.
perfectly free.
Well, wait, hold
to
on,
be
but you
very
can
frank.
even if your mommy and daddy aren't going to pay for your college, if you don't go to the college they want you to go to, you can still make the decision not to go to college. Then, right?
Correct.
Go
Correct, yeah.
do something else
With
if you can
a
pay for
lot
it.
of
Get
And
federal
if
student
larger-
mommy and daddy are paying for you, you're not getting a loan, right? Or at least it's
Well,
mommy and daddy's money,
depends.
then not the federal government's, even though sometimes it's
Yeah, so
supplemental.
to
I
say that they
understand.
don't have like free agency to make a decision like on their own is kind of silly.
So I think
All
Scott
right,
brought up
so
an interesting
real
point.
quick, I want to say something
I
really
wanted to say
quick.
you said
and
something
it's just
smart.
a moral thing. I appreciate it. If you are in a situation, right, and you are under the age of 26, and mommy and daddy will only pay for you to go to a super religious school, right? What you do is you find two friends that you trust to write an email, a small letter saying that they can confirm that you have been homeless in the past year. Whether or not you're homeless or not, but if you can get two people to say that you have been homeless in the past year, the federal government will then waive whatever it is that your parents are making in terms of determining whether or not you can get student loans.
Don't
So
defraud
if,
the
for
federal
example,
government, gang.
I'm just saying what people do. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do this. I'm just saying this is a possibility.
This is just
if
a
you're stuck in
mechanism
a religious
that is
family,
available.
right? It's just a mechanism that is available. If they're saying you better go to Liberty University, it is possible. If you were homeless in the last year and you can get two friends to say that you were, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter how much your parents make. You can go ahead and get federal student loans based off of your own finances, and you don't have to wait until you're 26. Wink, wink. We can continue. I just wanted to put out that random factoid that anybody may or may not use.
But make sure those friends accept your partner.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Scott said something earlier, right, about the like theoretically you could just kind of let the market decide this, but the problem is that there's a distortion here where then the federal government is funding some institutions and not others. I listened to a podcast earlier with the guy who runs this religious exemption accountability project, Paul Southwick. It was on some like formerly Mormon podcast, and they had two guests on there who were two former Mormon students. Actually, no, one from Liberty and one from BYU who were part of this lawsuit. And he was saying like his argument all along has been like this lawsuit, if it accomplishes what it wants, which is getting rid of that religious exemption, wouldn't affect any truly private school in the sense that no school that, is only privately funded gets affected. They get to discriminate all they want, right? These strings don't come attached, but what it will affect is schools that get federal money, which I want to buy, right? But the problem is there's still that like wild distortion there that's like, yeah, I mean, if I wanted to go to a school that like, represented my values and I would otherwise be eligible for federal money, I'm not now. And I just like, it's an interesting case where, like, as we've already said, these private schools that are doing this, it's not like the government is writing them grants. Their state legislature isn't funding them. The federal government isn't funding them directly. The federal government is funding me as a student. Wherever I go, that money comes with me. And so that sort of seems like the reasoning for why the exemption was there in the first place, that somebody might want to go to a school like that, and somebody who's gay or trans definitely would not, and they can choose to go to a different one. I just don't know how to handle that effectively, but...
So there's one thing that I want to add to this that is really important.
One second. Oh, actually, you add there one thing, and then I want to respond to you, Chris. Been meaning to like get a crack at it.
If this case goes and reaches a decision in the appellate courts, not even necessarily in the Supreme Courts, right? What you have is specific precedents on money being attached to students and the federal government being able to restrict additional things on those schools. And the reason this is really, really important is this is the easiest way to poison the well for school choice. You have so many conservatives and people clamoring for school choice.
But they already do that. And that's what, like, there's a
they do already do that, but this
there's
is
a significant number of people who oppose the current school choice movement because they're confident that it's going to come with these strings attached. Yeah.
I'm one of those.
Yeah.
Right? But Right, but what you're saying is not an argument against me. What you're just saying is they already do that. So,
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
right, right. And what I'm saying is this is one more thing that makes it easier to poison school choice. That basically allows the federal government to have more purview over private institutions and private schools. And so you may think, oh, my state finally gets school choice. I'm going to send my kid to like a private school and I'm going to pay the difference. And then there's case precedent now that says, but since the government is giving money to the student and the student's going to that private institution, we can initiate diversity, equity, inclusion, or we can instigate whatever thing we currently perceive as moral into your schools. And that's less freedom, not just from a college perspective, but also from like parents trying to send their kids to private schools.
And that's important, right? I can't believe, Fabian, this is a weird topic because 100%, right? So this is important because whether or not you think that it would be the right thing to restrict government money towards anti-LGBTQ schools or what have you, realize that as soon as the wind shifts, this precedent that Fabian Liberty is talking about is going to be used against what you think is right and proper. It just is. It has historically been.
Trump will get elected. Trump will get elected, and then and all the Republicans will sweep in, and then it'll be illegal in every private school to have
Canada.
like social transitioning for your kids.
Canada doesn't.
It'll be like illegal, like for you to even send your kid if you're like a woke like person with like a kid with gender dysphoria and you want to send them to a school that respects that, right? And you're in Florida or something, whatever.
We got
right?
it.
Like you're not going to be able to do that.
I want to, So, and maybe I misheard you, so I want to make sure I understand what you said correctly. Because you said that like LGBT kids would be uninterested in going to Brigham Young University.
No, I'm saying that possibility exists for them to go to a school that is not on its face discriminatory against them. They could take that money elsewhere. But like Scott said, what we're suggesting now is saying that a student who did want to go to a school that is, I'm not denying, is on its face discriminatory, that option is not available to them now, or would not be if this lawsuit accomplishes its ends. Yeah, that's what I was
So I think,
but obviously, there's tons of like gay and trans students who want to be at BYU for whatever reason, right? And they've presented their arguments. Like the article that you sent, one of the videos that was linked was like a local news thing, and one of the gay students was like, "I want to be here for the same reason any straight person wants to be here, right? It's a cool school and it has good education." And like, what do you mean? Why do I want to be? Like, I understand that. So I'm not saying like, oh, they wouldn't want to be there in the first place. They obviously do, but what we're looking at is potentially a different kind of discrimination. I'm not trying to like build a victim complex here, but yeah, you're saying like a student who wanted to attend a religious institution that enshrined certain values, had certain code of conduct. Well, yeah, you can do that. You just can't take your federal money with you.
Okay, so you at the start of this, you said something about like what you gave this a really fallacious example.
Okay, I didn't want to say they're equivalent. I'm saying that I think any like free association implies some kind of discrimination, and I just accept that. I'm fine if the Atheist and Humanist Association at my school won't let me run for the board because I'm a Christian. They shouldn't. That would be dumb. I should not be on the board of the Atheist and Humanist Association because I'm not. Right? Like that would just be stupid. They should discriminate against me, please.
No, okay. So like, I don't believe in this exemption, though. This particular exemption, because we recognize in other areas that we don't allow this discrimination. It doesn't matter if you are a private business. If people come into your door, you are to serve them like others, right? Like, and that's the way it should be. Because
we have this like threshold of like something that's a place of public accommodation, and that's how we deal with this in discrimination law. That like if the public generally is allowed in your door, great, you have to let the public in your door, and you can't discriminate on these bases that we've set down in the law. But a private educational institution isn't the same way. A church isn't the same way. A private social club isn't the same way. Not exactly. There are some things that you absolutely can't discriminate on, but like they're different in the sense that like it's an application based thing. We want certain types of people who meet certain qualifications, and we're allowed to do that.
Wait, just as a clarifying question, go ahead, Prime.
You're going to ask your clarifying question.
You just in the example that you get, like this is just maybe my ignorance on the U.S. system, but you threw in church there as like whatever, not a public space, so to speak. Is that actually like True.
Yeah, if you
Legally,
if-
yes, yeah, no, like
Yeah.
you can't get
Different
married in
status.
a Catholic church if you're not a member of the Catholic Church. They won't let you, and you can't.
Mormon temples
you
are
can
another
sue
one.
on that basis, but you're not going to win.
So
Like
Mormon, yeah, just to be clear, Mormon temples,
I can't even
they
go
don't
in one.
let. Yeah, most people can't go in one unless under very strictly controlled conditions, right? Like an
Yeah,
open
but like,
house
what
or
about like
something.
just like getting through the doors? Like,
No.
can they
If you are,
discriminate?
they have someone there, right? They'll
Okay.
check your recommend. They got a temple recommend. If you don't have a temple recommend, they turn you away.
Yeah, I dated a Mormon for quite a
There-
while and had 2
there
kids with
is
one.
no
yeah, no, they're not
problem.
letting me in.
There is
Send them
no
to Brigham Young
problem.
University.
There is no problem that a school can discriminate over many criteria, right? Like in terms of grades, you don't have good enough grades, then you don't get it. Right? That's okay. If you don't have a proper disciplinary record, right? Like let's say you got, I don't know, arrested for all kinds of stuff, and they're like, "Sorry, you're not coming in." Sure, but an intrinsic characteristic, that's the problem, right? That's the issue.
Is a PDA
to-
an intrinsic
But
characteristic?
PrimeCayes,
Oh my god!
the extra disciplinary issues
It's-
and the SAT scores and things like that are
Oh.
inherently discriminatory towards Black people.
I'm okay
So
with
you
getting rid of the
can't
SAT.
you can't do that based off of merit.
Sure. Okay, I'm gonna ignore that. For now, I need to let me focus on this, and I can deal with Scott later. Right? I'll deal with you.
So
later.
okay, on this point,
yeah.
Prime, I agree to an extent. So I was listening to a podcast on this. The president of Catholic University of America was talking about his position on this personally, legally, as a school, and their position. He's like, we do this at the beginning. We have like an anti-discrimination talk at the beginning. He says my position is we're not discriminating against people. We're saying there's certain things that you're not allowed to do while you're here, and that like this is the teaching of the Catholic Church, and this is what we enshrine in our code of conduct. Like you're allowed to come here, whatever you identify as, whatever your essential characteristics, whatever immutable characteristics, sorry. But yeah, we have a code of conduct that reflects our faith, and we exist as an institution to inculcate that faith in our students. And so you can either abide by that, or you can leave, or you cannot come. So I mean, in their perspective, they're not technically doing this kind of discrimination that is what you're talking about, which is like, no, you're a horrible person, you're a gay person, you're a trans person, you can't be here, you can't exist. They're not doing that. They're saying we have certain policies that are in place that, yeah, like here's how you're going to live while you're here. Yeah.
Who fucking cares what they think? Whether like they think they're being discriminatory or not? Right?
Well,
like,
the federal
those
government
guys.
does because it's
I know,
right there in the law. You know.
Talking, yeah. And the question was should, not is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, great. So they are being discriminatory pieces of shit, right? They are making people who show up to their school and who happen to be gay feel like they are less than, right? You can pretend to be inclusive all you want, but the message is clear, right? Like your lifestyle, or quote unquote lifestyle, right? Your lifestyle is abhorrent, right? To our teachings. And so if you display that, or we suspect you are displaying that, right? Even if you're straight, if you suspect you of displaying that, then that's a problem. I think that, especially when it comes to matters of education, right? Where, I mean, they're adults, you know, because they're 18 plus, but they're still, these are, we are, like educating them, right? We are enriching their
Or
mind.
socializing them.
Yeah. I think even better, right? Socializing them. That for an organization like that, like that's too far to create this atmosphere that is clearly discriminatory against people for just being who they are, right? Just or for if you are Black, right? There's I think this is Brigham Young University, maybe it's Liberty University, I forget which one, right? But there's that rule where you can't date interracially, right? Like imagine being
that was Bob Jones, and
Was that Bob Jones?
that's
Okay.
not
policy was
BYU.
rescinded
Excuse
in
me. Bob Jones.
2003. There was a court case, but yeah. So
But we can
race is something.
But why?
that-
But why was? Do you support that? Do you support that being rescinded?
I mean,
support their right
morally,
to do
yes.
so.
No, morally, yes.
Right, like more. I'm against Brigham Young University being against gay people. It doesn't match my values. But the fact of the matter is that you don't have a right to stop people from discriminating. It is wrong. It's wrong to.
We literally do that all the time. We
to.
actually do have a right to do that.
I know.
We do that all the time.
We violate people's rights all the time.
Scott, I already know your position on this, right? Hold on, and Wick, I got to get this out of you, Chris.
I'm just saying, you ought to be able to say, you ought to be able to have a sandwich shop that says no N-words allowed.
Gotcha. I know. I'm very supportive of that stuff. I know. Eucharist, do you think that in the society that you would prefer, right, that Bob Jones University should be able to discriminate in that way and saying no interracial dating?
I'm going to be annoying and be like Scott and say should in this sense can have two different like levels. Morally, no, they should not do that. It's a horrific thing to do, and you're just like, you're awful people. Okay, let me give you an idealistic paradise. If we had an idealistic world where people could just be punished by Scott's like ideal marketplace for being assholes, I would prefer that, right? Everybody knows that school down the road is the racist school, and you just don't fucking go there, right? Like I would prefer that, but also like we live in a world with power and politics and money and everything else, and that's not how things work. And so sometimes we have to intervene into people's freedom and do these things. So yes, I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing that Bob Jones lets black and white students date now. I think that's an awesome thing. The question for me and for this conversation, I think, is what we have right now in front of us is an exception that was carved out with the recognition that what we are laying down in certain anti-discrimination statutes, if you ask the people who practice these religions, would say, if I fully subscribed to this and ran my institutions this way, it would violate like the principles of my faith. So I'm either going to have to break the law or I'm going to have to leave the country or something else. And we decided in our pluralistic society that this was the best way to handle it. I don't think it was. Again, like I agree with this guy. I don't think the way we're handling it administratively is the best way to do it.
No.
But whether or not these institutions should be allowed to exist
at all. I don't give a shit about how it's done administratively. Like whatever.
I do. Like that matters a lot.
We can come up with a better way of doing that.
I think we kind of all agree that it's.
Hold on. Excuse me. Let me talk. Fuck. I'm just trying to get. Like I've been trying to get this out for 20 goddamn minutes. Shut up. All right. So, when it.
You can't get mad when you're a panelist and a moderator. You're gonna get interrupted.
So Eucharist, like if by their religion, they said, and it works well with Mormons, right? By their religion, they say, well, brown people, black people, or some sort of mud people, it says so in our religious text, and we don't want them at all. Should that be allowed?
Well, no, we've decided that that's out of bounds. So something that I wanted to bring up actually.
No, not we, you. Right, so like in the world that you are trying to create, right? You're saying,
wait, so now you're asking me to like run a theocracy if I'm just coming down from on high and instituting my morals politically, but that's not what I think I should do. So I'm saying like we have a process by which we can adjudicate these disputes in a pluralistic society, and that's the legislative process. And we did that. We've figured out that there are things that are outside of bounds.
No. You keep trying to weasel your way out of this.
I'm not trying to weasel.
Yeah, you are.
No, I'm not. I think religiously, I think that sort of doctrine is wrong and abhorrent. So I think they should not believe it, and I think you're stupid if you do. Right? That's what I would say.
Yeah, sure, but you would allow it. But you would
not.
Prime. So you fail to see the distinction.
Oh my God, Scott! Shut the fuck up! I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to you, Chris. That's fine.
Prime, let me say no. Would I allow this? No, not necessarily, because what I would say is if we come to a point where legislatively we change this and we revise Title IX and say this exception no longer exists, then yes, these institutions should stop discriminating, or they will not receive their federal funding, and they should be fully private and fund themselves and just exist and do whatever discriminatory stuff they want without the federal funding. If that's what the law says, they should follow it. But no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say we should allow these people to do the mud people thing. I don't know what you're saying.
So then, why is discrimination against gay individuals okay in your worldview?
because I share overlapping religious sentiments with some of these people who run these institutions. Yeah, like doctrinally, like and so I think again in a pluralistic society, I don't want these people making laws that these gay people shouldn't exist and shouldn't be able to have relationships and everything else. I want them to be able to have their institutions, just like I want the Muslim person to be able to say, no, actually, I get to exist in my institution and I get to do what I want. I get to have my laws and my rules and my that's fine, and you don't belong here unless you accept those and you abide by them. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I like pluralism. It's nice.
Can I ask you a question?
Hold on. So if they justified this discrimination with religion, like, so if we went back in time 42 years and with the Mormon church saying that black people have the mark of Cain,
right? Which I mean, again,
therefore can't be Mormons.
Bob
right?
Jones and some other places had similar views that I think are important.
We don't need to go to Bob Jones. Like we say, like the Mormon church, 40 years ago, they didn't allow most black people in because they thought they had the mark of Cain. And so if we had a Mormon university,
that's not true. They did allow them in. They just didn't allow them to hold the priesthood. It's a different.
Oh, okay, yeah, they didn't want the blacks having priesthood. I get.
World's better.
So
I mean, there's a substantive difference.
There's a difference.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So if one of these universities, right, let's say they have a theology course or something where people are learning, things that would push them toward priesthood or prepare them for priesthood, and they didn't allow blacks into that because they didn't want blacks to become priests within their religion, right? Would this be okay because they're justifying this with religion and not with your mud people or your subhuman?
I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say again, no, because I think that's wrong. Like what you're asking me now is like to dig into like what I think theologically and does my theology line up with theirs? And it doesn't, because I think that's wrong and bad. So but I'm not trying to adjudicate this through the lens of my theology. I'm not trying to say, well, I'm right, so everybody gets to do what I think is good and right, and that's what the law should be. I'm saying we have ways to deal with this if you guys think it should change.
So, I mean, if I can maybe ask a clarifying question to you, Chris.
And then
go ahead.
I'm going to say this, and then y'all go straight to you, right? Like, so what I'm asking is not for your moral framework, right? I'm asking for the legal framework that you want, and those things are two separate things. Those aren't synonymous, right?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Because I can feel I feel all kinds of ways about certain things morally, right? I have moral convictions, but I can recognize that within a legal context, those things don't work, right?
Sure. So let me tell you what legal framework I want. I want a world where we find a magic way to balance the free exercise of religion and our internal feeling that some forms of discrimination are really bad and wrong and we shouldn't do them. We haven't found a great way to do that yet. This one is bad, and I'm saying we should change it. But I don't have a perfect answer for you. So something that I'll point you to, though, came out last month, a book by Vincent Philip Munoz at Notre Dame. It's a Catholic school, right? But it's a book called Religious Liberty in the American Founding, and he digs into basically the whole argument about originalism, blah blah blah, and he thinks basically everybody's wrong. The conservatives are wrong, the Scalias and the whatevers over here are wrong, and the progressives are wrong. Really, this is a natural rights thing, and he goes through and says, like, case by case, let's talk about the things we're arguing about now. Let's talk about religious exceptions. That doesn't seem to fit with the framework that he develops. I think it's a really compelling argument. It's a great book, just came out, University of Chicago Press. If you want a PDF, I can send it to you. Okay, I found it compelling. I'm still thinking about it and chewing it over. I think what we're dealing with right now is the fact that in a pluralistic society, we're constantly having to balance between the fact that we have free association and free speech and free exercise of religion, which all imply in some way some ability to discriminate, and this feeling that, like, actually we should allow people to be free from other people's discrimination and domination over them. How do we balance those things? It's really fucking hard. So yeah, I don't have a perfect answer. I'm sorry.
It's not that hard.
I'm not an ANCAP.
Natural law.
It's hard if you're not an ANCAP.
If you try to be logical about morality as opposed to just holding paradoxes and contradictions.
Yeah, just so I am somewhat interested in your morality, Eucharist, and also from what I think I take your point in terms of, like, this seems to be sort of like you take issue with, like, the policy, and, like, the policy should be, like, legislatively changed. But just to maybe ask a clarifying question to, at least for me, understand your morality better. If you were to, open or start a church of your own, would you yourself allow same-sex marriage in your own church?
A church of my I wouldn't start a church of my own because my theology precludes that. So that's
okay.
So I can't. It's an unanswerable question.
Okay, I'll take that answer.
So at the end of the day, right? At the end of the
I
day,
understand the Prime's frustration.
Yeah, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, right? We have to decide as a country, as a nation, what we are willing to let the federal government decide for us or not. And I personally do not want the federal government to be able to tell me what higher education place because again, it's higher education. We do not consider that a right in this country to have higher education. Whether you think we should or should not, it is not currently considered a right. And there is, I think, sorts of types of discrimination that we would be rightfully so, and that the government should step in against. If BYU or any other university was saying no black people or no gay people, right? We don't allow them. I think that's where I would have less of a problem with the federal government staying in. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is due to their religious preferences, they have said we do not allow these sorts of activities to be had, which, yes, are discriminatory against the LGBTQ community. But they are still, if they abide by those rules, are allowed in. And I think that
Why
is
is
the
why
difference.
is the well, I guess what I don't understand is like why is the entry like the like the line for you? So they're letting them in, but once they're in, they're saying, hey, you have to pretend you're not gay or you need to hide your gayness or whatever the fuck. Like if
You
they
don't
told a
have,
trans person, if you told a trans person, hey, yeah, while you're here on campus, you need to, we're going to use your, you know, your born pronouns, and you
sure.
can't present as anything but the sex that you were born, etc.
I don't think
Like
they're saying that,
think
though,
it's,
are they?
I know, but I'm asking you, right? So if they did
kind
say
of,
that,
Some
yeah.
of them are.
Yeah.
Are
Some
they?
of them
I'm
are.
not
Some of
sure.
them.
This was the
so
George
with that,
Fox University exemption that was surprised the
Elizabeth,
student was
I
a
think,
trans
I can't
student.
remember, it was Elizabeth something, but she was basically told that like she needed to dress more feminine at the school in
Yeah.
order to follow the honor
because they don't
conduct.
accept,
Okay,
they don't
noted.
accept the transness.
Carry
right?
with
So,
your
like,
carry on with your question.
okay, so it's I would think that you would still think that's a problem, right? And it seems like effectively that's what's being done to gay and lesbian students here.
I don't. I think that the federal government should not be able to tell a university that they can't do that. And while I find it abhorrent, I think that when we allow the federal government to say, "Hey, no, if our again, we're talking about private universities here, not public. My stance is different for this. But simply because the students who are going to these universities are all choosing to go to these universities, right? They're receiving the money and then choosing to use that money. No one is being forced into these universities. I think that's what makes the federal government should be able to stay out of it. So if a trans individual wants to live by the precepts that this whatever crazy school says, hey, if you come here, you have to do these things or live this way if you want to be here. I think that the federal government has no business telling them they can't do that.
Do you think people should be able to use like federal money toward educational institutions that are not accredited?
You know what? I don't know. I can't give you an answer on
Don't
that. I
know.
don't know the I don't know the
if I-
accreditation process well enough to give you an educated answer on that because I don't know the accreditation process, what steps are taken, how they make these determinations. So I can't give you an actual answer. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess you really need to know the actual steps to know what I'm asking, right? Which is, hey, this school hasn't been given either state or federal stamp of approval as an educational institution, right? So given that's the case, if I've set something up in my garage somewhere, like, hey, I'm having students come in here and I'm teaching them whatever, right? Why shouldn't the federal government be able to say, hey, actually, we don't consider that to be a school that we want to be sending our money to. We don't consider this to be a real or like a legitimate educational institution. So given that's the case, we're not going to let you use our money toward that thing. Like, why is that okay, but it's not okay to say that, hey,
it's okay to have certain standards, right? That you want.
Why can't the standard be, hey, we're not going
Other
to
standards. Just let
support
me finish answering your question. I guess I can answer your
schools that are
question.
discriminatory?
Let me know when you're ready for me to answer my question.
Well, I'm just gonna add on to it a little bit that you can answer. Right. So
Okay.
you agree that there can be standards, right? So that's good. But why can't a standard that the federal government puts in place be that we're not going to use federal funds towards schools that are openly discriminatory?
Because that implies ideology, and one of the standards is the ideology of the school comes into play, not the professional, or not professionalism is the right word, but not the what is a good word? Expertise? I'm not sure the word I want here, but there is a substantive difference, right? And this is why I can't give you the proper answer because I don't know the processes for accreditation, right? But because why they draw
I
the
think the word
lines
you're
they
searching for
do.
is academic standards.
Academic standards, thank you. But why they draw the lines they do is important. It does matter to me, because I think that once you open that door for when you say that an institution, keep in mind, a private institution has to allow all of these behaviors, then we get into some really dicey territory, and I want
I
private
don't think it's that
institute
dicey.
I value private institutions' ability to say no, because we are a religious institution, or because we want a drug-free institution that if you are on our campus, you can't drink alcohol. I think that's a great one that should be allowed, for example. And when you open up that door to different behaviors, it gives the federal government to say, no, actually, you're discriminating against people who smoke, or you discriminating against people who drink, or you discriminating against people who engage in these other behaviors that you, as a religious institution, find personally offensive. Again, I think no, we don't let the federal government do
Let
that.
me-
ridiculous. Like, okay, but why is this like a? I don't understand, like, genuinely why you would think this is an issue, because this is
So-
something that already happens, right? So if you're like, for example, if you have like a federal contractor or subcontractor, that federal money comes with strings attached and requirements attached to it, right? It could be just that the workplace is like vaccinated, right? And they're remaining in compliance in that way.
I was
So,
against the
so given-
mandates for
So given that
vaccines
these are
too.
that these are private institutions, but they are interfacing with and accepting federal money, right? What is the issue with it saying, hey, if you'd like to move out of the
They
fully
aren't the-
private status
it's
and start accepting federal money and federal loans, right? You need to do this stuff, right?
because
that seems
the
totally
way that
straightforward.
they're accepting this federal money is through the student, and so that matters, right? Because
that
you
the
are
only
saying to
mechanism?
the
Like,
student.
I'm just asking.
Sure.
No. So there's two answers. There's two answers to this question, right? The first one, which is the status response, right, is that you have a First Amendment, the right of free speech, which enshrines the right of your religion as well. And this is obviously like a religious faith issue. And that's why there's a religious exemption to Title IX, is because of those First Amendment protections. So that's the easy answer, is that the difference here is that they have certain religious values at their institution that they wish to enshrine in their students and population, and to forcibly strong arm them away from that is a violation of their First Amendment rights. The real answer is that the government's involvement in this at all is the source of the conflict. And Doobie, you point out an excellent point, which is that how we choose to attach things to this money, which is taxed and involuntarily taken from American citizens and from businesses. Close to 50% of all of our wealth is stolen from us by the state. How we choose to use that money has arbitrary lines of what we can do to force you to accept certain things that the government believes. And the government doesn't have any rights, but we're treating it like it does. Like it is this arbiter, and that because we all get to vote, we have this plurality, and we have this beautiful system where we can just force minorities of people that disagree with us to do what it is that we want to do. And so that's the source of the conflict. If we didn't have a federal student loan program and Pell Grants and all these other things, we would have much higher education standards. We would have much more money to spend. Banks would be able to give out much better loans that were targeted towards the success of the degree that you're in. So it'd be easier, for example, if you had good grades to get an engineering degree than, let's say, get a psychology, sociology degree. But if you had amazing grades, they would probably give you those loans because they'd be like, you're probably going to achieve some relative
At the end of the day,
So
if you don't want
those
to go somewhere,
programs are
don't go
attached
there.
there. Right.
If they don't have standards you want to obey, don't go there. That's it. It's not like there's a dearth of colleges, right? There's thousands. There's thousands of colleges to choose from, and with the advent of online classes, it's easier than ever to get a college that will adhere to whatever belief system or structure you wish to have. And I think that's a good thing, the freedom of choice here. And when we start putting limits on people's choices, when it comes to their belief systems, I don't like it.
But
Wait,
again,
so
go ahead. Dewey.
well, I'm wondering if this is like if you draw like a line around the educational system, because what if it's just like a store or a restaurant or something? right? And they don't want the gays in their store, or they don't want
If a
black people
store
in the
doesn't
store, or
want
whatever.
PDAs in their store, they're free to enforce that.
No,
right?
not just
Unless you're
PDAs. They don't want
unless
trans
you're-
people to enter the store. They don't want gay people to enter the store. Like, why is being able to set your foot across the threshold, okay, like the line at which, so long as they allow you to set your foot in the store, it's okay for them to discriminate. Like, why is that like? That doesn't make any sense. Like,
Well,
what if you had a store that was
It's the
charging people
opposite.
more?
If
What if you had a
if
store that was charging people more on the basis of their skin color? Right? Would that be okay?
no, of course not. Right? Of course not.
That's
And I
my
think
position,
that-
not Wick's position.
I'm sorry. Like I think that it's
That's
wild to me that
stupid,
we can't distinguish between a business and an organization or an institution with a mission and a goal and values like that. Like the idea that
the
like, we
educational
can't
system
draw
the mission
some
is to make money.
Yeah.
Right? So
education in the United States is a business. I would argue
no,
it's a business.
no, education.
Yeah,
no,
don't do this hoity-toity shit. It's a
pure,
business.
like liberal brain nonsense, deficient view of education. No, it's silly. It's absolutely silly. To be like,
I agree.
Why,
No,
why,
no,
no, hang on. No, why do schools
bring-
spend so much time selling their values, their public investment in their community? This is not just like, it's not just a business. This isn't just a product that I'm selling at a farmer's market. Okay, this is far thicker than that. There's a reason. There's cults and religion around your schools and chants and songs. You know, like it's absolute silliness to be unable to distinguish between the burger shop down the street and the institution that's been in your town for
It's
300
conflation.
years.
Yeah, just conflation of
no,
terms.
no, this is
Everything's a
stupid.
business. Everything's
So if you look,
everything's that.
any business has a fucking mission statement. Like if I just look up Starbucks, right? Their mission statement, their goal, right, in their business is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. Right, and they do lots of charity within the communities to push
Beautiful,
this kind of belief.
absolutely beautiful.
So I don't know. So if they can say, hey, actually, yeah, we're not just about making money.
So, Doobie, are you the capitalist here who's saying there's no difference between a capitalist institution and a provision of a public good? Are you the one who's making that argument? That there's no difference between me selling a fucking commercial product and providing a public good, a civic good?
This is a private university, right? So what a civic good or
private universities have always been considered part of the service of the public good. We've always funded private universities with state money.
Ridiculous.
We always have.
They're money-making institutions. No, that's stupid. They're money-making institutions.
Okay, some of them are now. They're hedge funds with a veneer of education, but that's not the point of the school.
The difference
we can buy into their marketing and the idea that they have like this grander mission that they're trying to pursue, just like any other business has that page on their website.
There's a substantive
but the reality is
that
that they're a business, and the way that they make the money is educating people. That's it.
The difference.
It's not.
You don't have to make money. They're nonprofits.
It's not
the
it.
difference.
Most of them.
The difference between Starbucks and a university, right, is that when you go to Starbucks, you're there for an instant and brief amount of time, right? All Starbucks is doing is selling you a cup of coffee and like a cake pop, or possibly a place for you to sit down and write your screenplay that no one's ever going to look at, right? Like that's what Starbucks is offering you. When you are going to a university, you are taking, and people don't want to accept it, but let's be fucking honest, anybody over the age of 30 knows that an 18-year-old's a goddamn child, right? That you're taking your fucking kids, your adult kids, but kids nevertheless, and you're taking them for likely more than 3 years, right? Possibly much longer than that, depending on whether or not you got a Van Wilder situation with your kid, right? And so, yes, they are selling a product as a business. That is part of what they're doing. And plenty of businesses have values and goals in the ways that they sell their products. Hospitals are a great example of this, where you have private hospitals, you have public hospitals, you have Catholic hospitals that have specific visions and things that they want to do. But the difference is the amount of time that you spend with them, and because of that, the amount of power that they have to shape
It's
you.
not
And the
the amount of
product that they're selling. The product that they're selling is education, and how successful that education is going to be.
It's not. No,
like you're giving it this
goal
hallowed
isn't
fucking
selling a product.
spiritual shit, and not fucking backing it up with anything other than your fifis. That it's this beautiful fucking hallowed thing. It's not. It's just a longer business that sells a product.
What is the end? What is the end goal of a hospital? What's the point? Is it provision of is it just making money? It's never been that. It's never been that. That's why so many of them are nonprofits,
It absolutely
donation
is
done
that.
voluntarily. That's ridiculous. That's
It
not the point.
depends on
The
the
end goal of
hospital.
hospital is the
Pay
promotion
their doctors
of health.
hundreds of
It's
thousands of
healing,
dollars.
right?
Yeah.
There's something different than just me selling you a cup of coffee.
No.
The end goal of Starbucks is for you to get your coffee and for me to get my money. The end goal of education
And future
is the
returns
inculcation
to
of
Starbucks.
virtue. Okay, you guys have just
It's
this like
ridiculous.
fundamentally deficient view of health and economics. And business.
You're
Like,
fucking-
Okay.
oh
no,
Well,
you're
God,
fucking
This
Eucharist.
line of
you're-
reasoning, we
no,
shouldn't believe
this
that
is
Andrew
your
Tate's
own
Hustler
fucking-
University is just like a fucking pyramid scheme because
Eucharist.
he has his whole mission statement about making strong men
No,
and
okay,
helping
I'm
men
not
be better in their
no,
lives.
Eucharist.
Because he's pushing
You
this
have
idea.
all your
the
own
whole goal of
bullshit.
this fucking pyramid scheme.
I'm asking
it's
what is the end? I'm asking what is the end goal? What is the goal of the thing
For
that you
Hustler
are
University,
doing?
it's to make strong men who can do well
No,
in the world.
no.
right?
The goal of
To
Hustle
better
University
themselves.
is to make Andrew Tate rich. Okay, that's fine.
What
But
about
that's
Trump
not what
University?
it says on his website. That's not what it says
What
on his
about-
website.
Well, I don't. Yeah.
His website is all about building up men, teaching
All right.
men how to be stronger, successful,
Okay.
et cetera, et cetera.
All right.
Right?
All
Like,
right,
what are
cool.
you talking about?
So I agree with
That's
your
all
sentiment
businesses.
of like
It's stupid.
education should be viewed as a public good, which is why I'm all for like pretty much the universal access to higher education. But like I'm an outsider, I'm a Canadian, but to Doobie's point, it seems to me as an outsider, and it seems like Doobie as an American sort of backs us up. Like it seems like education is run just like healthcare is run as a pretty much largely for profit, as in like
It's not.
it-
No,
it
it's
seems-
not.
it
Most
seems
of them
almost
are nonprofits. For-profit
you-
universities are the
you-
exception, not the rule. That's
you-
not.
you-
It's just not true.
I-
Like BYU, for example, I can give you some insight, right, into BYU University. It is funded by the church. It in of itself, I'm not sure if it's profitable, but it's never like it's turned down public funding. When the COVID crisis hit, for example, the state voted to give it $32 million. It didn't take a damn cent of that because it said, no, we are not taking this money from the government because of the strings attached to it, right? Because it was a direct thing. And so if it was just for profit, it absolutely would have taken all that money, right? Absolutely, 100%.
Eucharist, no, listen. Listen,
Right,
I'm gonna like listen.
You
real quick.
keep talking, right? We understand your point. State bad. Got it. Okay, moving on.
That's
So
not my
when-
point. I thought you were done because you finished your statement. I'll let you continue. I'm my bad,
Please.
dude.
It's okay. But when it comes down to it, right? Like this idea that Eucharist is trying to get across, which is a difficult one to get across, to be quite frank with you, is that this idea of it's all capitalism when it comes to the American education system isn't necessarily true. In some cases, absolutely it is. There are some scam universities out there. There are some universities out there who are absolute, like Hustler U and stuff, just money grabs. But in many cases, a lot of these have higher mission statements, things that they are trying to do, and communities that they are trying to get, services they are trying to provide that have nothing to do with the capitalist motivations. And that's my point.
Let me just interject here, right? Because the problem is that it seems like Eucharist and maybe myself, even other people, are creating this like black and white scenario, right? The argument that you've made for the university could be made about almost essentially any business. So let me give you an example. I have an autistic son, right? I have an idea for something that like I might want to patent, right? Something that I kind of made myself as a father for my autistic son that really helped him, right? I make a business, but the reason I make the business isn't purely profit based. It's also because I believe that this is a product that will help people and will help autistic parents of autistic children have a better life and be able to have a better situation and help that situation. I actually have a product in mind. I'm obviously not going to say that helps autistic kids sleep, right? Now, what am I doing? Am I purely motivated by profit in that regard? Well, I'm a competing business. I have to be motivated by profit, just like universities have to be motivated by profit, just like nonprofit organizations have to be motivated by the fact that they're a competing business. So they have to sell themselves. They have to market themselves. They have to have a good return on the money that people give them. They operate much the same way. And so this idea that like the education system is somehow magically different from business is a very black and white view way of ascribing just like the greedy capitalist is there for the sole profit incentive, but the university is this hallowed system of like inculcating your values, when the fact of the matter is that all businesses want to inculcate values. They all have their own goals.
First of all, Eucharist, you like tossing out like non-for-profit hospitals as if these organizations are somehow better in the way they treat their patients or the way they operate or anything like that. Non-for-profit just means that you can get off without paying local property taxes, right? Like that's what that means basically. The government treats you as a charity.
Yeah, sometimes,
You're not a fucking charity. Like they don't operate like a charity, and in fact, they can be even more expensive than a for-profit hospital. All these things are true, right? Like,
I'm saying, Prime, I don't have the time to go at length and talk about the differences between different business models and markets for hospitals and all of these things. I'm saying that you have a deficient view of medicine if you think that the provision of medicine thing as the provision of a pure good or service for an exchange of money. It's ridiculous. You need something higher than that aims at health and wellness. These are things that matter to a hospital system and matter to medicine. So you can critique the way the system currently works.
Correct. No, but like you have a deficient understanding of how medicine actually works in this nation, right?
I don't
maybe
actually.
In Canada,
Maybe
in Canada. They have a better view.
Are you calling him the Canadian slur, Prime? Wow, I thought that.
I'm saying in Canada,
I can't actually explain my point.
In Canada, maybe they actually feel that way. Not here in America. Not the way we designed our system. That's not the case. Right? We've given them incentive models that make it so that that money matters. Sure, yes, there are people who are within the medical system who feel the way you feel, right? Feel that it's the helping people comes first, no matter what organization they might be a part of. They're there for that particular reason. I'm talking about the management, and I think it's where other people are trying to get to.
It's not even different.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
I'm perfectly willing to talk about criticisms of the management. Like I'm fine to do that. I'm saying what we were just hearing was this argument that it is no different than any other business. It's like a Starbucks, but you're in there for longer. That's bullshit. It's wrong. It's false.
It isn't any different. Not in terms of
we can have a whole separate argument about this. Fine. Like I'll do that. I'll one-on-one anybody about this. But it's bullshit. It's nonsense. I can't.
That's three conversations, Eucharist.
I can't explain this.
You can't explain it, but it just is.
There's five people. There's five people fucking talking over me, Scott. If you'd like me to explain for an hour, I can. We can talk about this. We can read some books.
If you need an hour to explain a substantive difference, then you have a shit argument.
I just explained the substantive difference. It's in fundamental ends, like aiming at health, aiming at money acquisition, and aiming at the inculcation of virtue are fundamentally fucking different things, Scott.
And I just gave you an example of how businesses aim at a fundamental virtue.
The incentive structures are also different.
We'll talk about this sometime. Like I'd love to talk to any of you about this sometime.
And that it's a there's a lot to this, and there's a lot of meat. There's a lot of foundations you need to build in order to have a proper conversation, and that's just going to be impossible to do in the time frame we have and with the environment.
No, it's not. This is a cop out. It just seems like you guys read the mission statement for college, just like any business has a mission statement where they fluff themselves up, but you guys actually believe the college mission statement. Like it's ridiculous.
No, it's just. No. All right. Well, Eucharist wants to move on. He'll take that L and pass it on to another time, I
guess. Sorry.
I'm gonna go make a pot of coffee.
No, I just I'll just reiterate my major point here. And the reason that this became a discussion is there are reasons, right, that I think that it's okay when the government says you cannot discriminate to a business than a private institution like a church, a university, or a home, right? There is fundamental differences between how we view these things in institutions in America, and there's a fundamental difference in their purpose. And I think that that is why I'm okay in one instance of saying, yes, if you go to the grocery store, you shouldn't be able to turn away someone for simply being a certain way. And again, in this university, in the instance we're talking about, no one is being turned away because they are gay. They are being turned away, or they have to live by a certain code of behavior, and there's a fundamental difference there. That's all.
No, sorry, don't give me that. That's
but-
bullshit. That's Catholic Church nonsense, right? And it's like,
And-
oh, we hate the sin, not the sinner. Did you accept that when the Catholic Church said that nonsense?
Do you think there is no difference, though? You could say both are bad.
Effectively
I agree
none.
with you.
Effectively none.
I 100% disagree. I 100%
yeah,
disagree, right?
effectively none. Because
There are places I
because-
can go.
And as we saw from decades of, well, I'm not sure if it's decades. I'm not sure how long that regime lasted, or maybe they're still doing it. I don't know, whatever. But like you talk to people who were gay and within the Catholic Church, they'll tell you that encouraged that level of hatred against them. It encouraged their discrimination. It said that these people were wrong, right? Like, sure, you can have these urges, but like it becomes a fucking pedophile conversation all over again, right? Yeah, well, it's okay, you have these urges, doing them is abhorrent, right? Like, and which is, I mean, in terms of pedophiles, that's the case, right? But like, I'm saying that like it made them feel that way, but no, it made them feel that way, right? And do you think that a gay person should feel that way? In terms of, should they feel
stigmatize them?
Feel like should they be stigmatized like pedophile behavior?
But none of these people are being forced to go to this institution. No one is being forced to sign up for it. They are choosing. They are making this choice to put themselves in this environment. They're not children.
First of all, no one should go to Brigham Young University. It's a disgusting place. Don't
But
be
if they
involved with it.
want
Or Bob
to-
Jones University or Liberty University. I know it's just utterly disgusting. I would encourage nobody to go there. Like, in fact, the reason why I read that article, the first article in the first place, is because I was baffled. Like, why is a gay person, this lesbian woman, why as a lesbian would you go there? I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Yeah, so that's
Like, it
why I
doesn't
asked the
make any
question,
sense
like,
to
is
me.
there pressure? Like, how free is someone who's growing up in the Mormon community, like, actually
What is
voluntarily
free?
going?
Yeah, but further, I think most of us here would probably agree that this college can exist as a private college. The issue comes in when they're taking public money, when they're taking
Yeah, it's
federal
fully
loans.
private. I personally have, like, if in fact that's where, like, I'm
what
unsure
you're
of, like,
saying-
how much
Corey,
funding they get
Corey,
from.
what you're saying in this case, what you and Doobie are both saying here, is that someone who gets a federal loan, a federal or a GI Bill, goes to the military, right, does their service, serves their term honorably, and chooses and gets their GI Bill, right? You are saying that they cannot choose. You are taking away this freedom of choice from them to say, I want to go to BYU because I've been
Yes, they
Mormon
also
all my
can't
life.
use that money toward a college, quote unquote, that hasn't been accredited. Yeah, of course.
And
But
is
it's
that the
based
only
on
form of,
ideology.
like, federal funding or, like, whatever public money that?
No, there's
is-
federal loans, right? There's federal loans. There's other forms of federal like subsidies, but as far as I could understand, in my brief amount of research in this, looking this up, there are two ways that BYU gets federal money, and only two ways, right? The first one is through GI Bills, federal loans, things attached to the student, and the second is when they partner with public universities for building, like the example I saw was an Asian language center.
Yeah, so, like, based off of my understanding, given the fact that like,
There's private as you
BYU
can be in the U.S.
Yeah,
like,
it's you can't
but
get more private, right?
but it seems like they've to Eucharist, what alluded to earlier, like, they applied for an exemption, and so as a result of that exemption, like, they're able to, like, implement these policies. Like, in my mind, I could be wrong, like, in my mind, the very fact that they are applying for this exemption, like, sort of hints to me that they are, like, in some sense operating on some public funds, and therefore they cannot have
No.
this policy.
Title
I could be
IX.
wrong.
Title IX applies. Like, even if a college wasn't, for example, wasn't taking any federal student loan money or Pell Grant money or research grant money and never partnered with other universities to do anything, Title IX as a law would still apply to them, right?
Okay, yeah,
And
fair
so
enough.
because that law applies, they're saying, hey, we're a religious institution. We want to file under 34 statute 106.112 for a religious exemption from some of the rules of Title IX based off of our religious freedom.
Yeah. Well, I would just be in favor
So it's
of
an exemption
abolishing.
from
Yeah.
state law
That's you don't
and
want that,
pleading
Corey.
for the First Amendment.
Well, we can get into
You
that,
don't
but that's a
want
separate
this, Corey. Like when you create this mechanism, when you say that the government, the federal government, the state can have like a say in what you can think or do in your private institutions, your clubs, your home, right? And if you don't want certain activities in your home or in your church or in your school, your private school, to be very clear, you go down dangerous paths, and as soon as the bad guys get the people who have substantive differences morally than you or I, right? Because again, like I think it's abhorrent what BYU does in their forms of discrimination. I want to be very clear. Perhaps I haven't been clear enough with that today, but I want to be very clear that personally, I find it abhorrent. I didn't go to BYU because I think that their policies are too restrictive, not just to gay people, but just to freedom in general. So that's one of the big reasons I didn't go there. And I chose not to use my GI Bill to go there.
You don't want to get caught drinking a cup of Joe on
yeah,
BYU
getting
campus.
coffee, you get in just as much. I don't know about just as much trouble, but you get
Maybe, yeah, not just as much trouble, but you're getting in trouble for drinking coffee.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a lot of like religious restrictions in there I didn't want to be a part of. But see, I think it's okay to allow them to make those discriminations, because when I make a club or an institution or something which says, hey, I don't want people who believe in an ethno-state to be able to preach or spread their rhetoric within my institution, I don't want the government to say I have to let them. And there are definitely, we're in a position right now where if certain parties get in charge, that is a real possibility. It's not hyperbole. And so we have to keep this mechanism out of the federal government's hands, because we don't want the federal government to be able to force their bigotry on us.
Yeah,
now, if you could just take that logic to all of the government, I'd be super happy, Wick. If you could just take that everywhere, you'd be right with me.
Yeah, so that was actually so. First off, I think you're like super. I think you're like in super hyperbolic territory. I think you're massively overstating how big an issue like ethno-staters are in the U.S. First off, secondly, I think that to Scott's point, if you were to apply this logic to like anything else, you get to the point where you're effectively arguing that we can't have laws because someone bad might come into power and make bad laws.
I got it.
Of course. So like. So like I think like we need laws.
That's not what he's saying at all. I don't think. I think he's saying that there's certain ways of administering law that are more subject to the whims of an arbitrary dictator or bureaucrat, right? So if we that's what checks and balances exist for. Yes, we can have laws, and somebody else could make a bad law down the road. But if you put like a supreme executive power in the hands of some unelected bureaucrat, you're going to have a bad time when the next unelected bureaucrat is the person.
Nobody's arguing that.
But
nobody's arguing about putting supreme unelected power in hands of
that's what we're talking about with the DOE. That's what we're talking about with these exceptions. That's how they're adjudicated. And that's exactly what Wick is talking about. He's not saying don't make a law because it could be abused. He's saying there are certain types of law that are more likely to be abused than others. And we should probably stop handing the most important things that you guys all clearly care about, like discrimination, to the ones that are more likely to be abused.
I mean, the right answer is just to abolish the Department of Education. We won't have these fucking problems.
All right. So we'll all right, we'll have to move on.
All of you laughing just lack imagination.
I might want to take you, Chris, up on the state that debate on the state of healthcare and how that actually works.
Okay. Prime, I don't want to talk to you about the state of healthcare. I want to talk about how healthcare fundamentally as a concept in an institution is different than a Starbucks. I want to talk about how the provision of education, the reason we're all fighting about this is because Scott thinks that the Marxists are indoctrinating our K-12 kids, and you, Prime, think our consciousness should be heightened in our schools and we should be made aware of social justice issues. You all clearly think that education is not just the provision of fucking coffee. So, like, that's all I'm saying. Is that, like, this
no.
consequential than what we're trying to strip it down. We're doing nothing buttery. This is nothing but a business that you hang out in for a long time, and that's bullshit.
Okay. Sorry, that maybe if that's what you understood, my understanding of this thing, then no. Like I in fact, I started to try to make that make that distinction, right? I talked when before, and I got constantly interrupted, so I don't know if anyone understands what my point might have been. But I talked about how like schools are important because of their place in our society, and that you're
It
trying
should
to
be a
educate
public
and
good.
socialize. Yeah, exactly, right. Like I tried to make that distinction. I understand there's a difference there. That it's not just the same as a Starbucks, great, but but in the terms of their administration, in terms of like how management treats like its clients or customers, everyone to look at a student, is that like I think that there are a lot of parallels there, a lot of
Yeah,
unmistakable parallels.
it's
Yeah, so
commodified
if you
like
don't
a
like
Starbucks.
the Starbucks comparison,
I
it's
was
more
mentioned
like
real
a
quick.
karate dojo.
I was
basically.
mentioned, so real quick, I just want to say, yeah, my issue here is that human rights violation is a human rights violation, period.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's in the form of education or business. When you're violating human rights, it's wrong, period.
All right. So